This is Rethinking the Mundane with Jo and Lex.
Where a creative technologist and industrial designer talks about everyday mundane objects in our life and we question it, we think about a new purpose, or we just keep it the same. And today we're going to talk about,
Bins.
okay, so right in front of me, there are two bins,
There's two, yeah.
a trash and recycling bin. But I know you're always somebody who has the historical context on stuff at times. So talk to me about
About bins.
bins and how they've sort of become a part of our every. Oh, you got a lot of bins in here.
Yeah, we've got
Just look at this. Just right in front of me. Like I see, like
we've got a lot of bins because then people don't leave stuff lying around. Um, so bins have been used for thousands of years in terms of in its loosest sense a place where rubbish was put. But it was only in sort of post-war in the UK in the sort of 50s that recycling and the idea of like material recapture and stuff like really came like mainstream. I think
yeah,
that sort of the idea of um, going through that war period and not having a lot, really valuing what we had and if
yeah,
there was value that could be got back from say like a deposit return scheme, if
yeah,
you brought back a milk bottle and you got that money back, then you would obviously be doing that. And then I think in the sort of 60s they standardized waste collection, and obviously now in the UK it's not it's not standardized, but there's in most councils in most boroughs there will be obviously some form of recycling. You've got your general waste, you've got maybe food collection, and then your recycling bins may be split into glass, plastics, paper, and on average, most people kind of understand the idea of what recycling is.
yeah,
But I think it's one of those things that we don't really realize how much trash we actually have, like how much rubbish we actually produce until the waste doesn't get collected anymore.
mm,
Like last, not a couple of weeks ago, I live in Tower Hamlets. The bin men just decided to stop collecting. I think they went on strike basically, and they stopped collecting waste. And within days, it was flowing over the streets. Like you couldn't
mm,
walk down the pavements. It was insane that people were stopping, taking pictures. A really windy day, and there was like
yeah,
trash like blowing all up in the air. And then it absolutely poured down, and so it was just swimming with rubbish. And it was like really opens your mind as to what happens behind the scenes, the
mm,
infrastructure that's in place. We are so lucky to have in the UK that actually collects our waste
yeah,
and takes it away, disappears it.
yeah. But there must have been, I guess, what was the technological innovations or like the sort of material innovations which contributed to art where we have so much waste? Because I was watching there was this architect on Architectural Digest, I think that's how you pronounce it, and he's talking about like the different homes in New York and the different styles of homes, and he touches on one type of home, and I think he mentions that I think he says with certain some of the houses, the designs they didn't have necessarily on the New York grid system, they didn't necessarily have alleyways because it wasn't at the time when they designed the New York grid system for to design the city, waste like a bin setup did not exist because whatever waste would constantly be used back into things. So it was just constant continuous. I guess maybe you might have like, except for like I don't know the actual word. What's the word from if you did a number two? But I guess with general other like forms of waste, it was constantly somehow trying to be repurposed and re-put back. But I guess in sort of the now where we have a lot of these maybe hard plastics or very, particular things, sometimes you get delivery boxes that are over purposed for the item that's in. So you by design, in some way, shape, or form, we just
Yeah.
produce waste. And I guess that's contributed to the rise or the importance of bins, right?
Yeah, so like the FMCG industry obviously has a lot to answer for because uh, say let's take food for example, huge contributor to waste, both from like organic waste and plastic waste. You like finding ways to streamline that to kind of cut costs. We weren't necessarily always making eating producing stuff homegrown, so we'll be shipping stuff in overseas. that needs to then be packaged in a certain atmosphere or certain conditions to ensure that the food lasts for the duration of that shipping time or that air freight. And then it needs to be obviously in the supermarket. We can extend the shelf life a little bit by putting it in plastic. And then obviously when we get it into our homes, we also have, particularly say after COVID-19, a perception of cleanliness, like you're not necessarily wanting to pick up apples that someone else has touched. You want them, you kind of would choose perhaps to get them in a plastic wrap.
Yeah.
But all of these things then contribute to waste, because you've got mountains of plastic. And then on the other side of things, which another massive contributor is companies like Amazon have allowed us to be able to just get something delivered to us. We don't have to go out, don't have to go to shops. We just get it delivered to us, but obviously then it comes in a cardboard box. So we've got an additional box. It may be in a massively oversized box for the product that it's in, packed with like stuffing, and means that we're buying more than we need to because we can. It's at our fingertips. And so I think there's a sort of real, like from the 50s till now, we're buying more. The stuff that we're buying isn't, as you say, like carefully packaged, or there's just more materials than it needs to. And then the huge increase in plastic that we're using makes recapturing those materials very difficult because it's such a low value material.
Yeah. And okay, would you say the bin in its current function, does it work?
It's an interesting one because I think especially, so we went from this sort of quite careful, sort of not penny pinching, like very conscious, like material resource and resource kind of conscious way of living post-war, and then there was this just huge boom in growth in sort of in the UK and definitely in the US around the sort of 70s and 80s, and it switched from living quite meagerly, having few possessions, to suddenly like success meant buying. You earned money and then you went out and you bought stuff, and that just drove the economy, and people just bought more than they needed. And so obviously then to deal with all of those things, there's only so much stuff you can put in a house. And you then buy something, you'd be like, well, I'm not going to fix that, I'll just buy a new one. And so obviously then we were chucking out stuff, and the things that were going into the bin just become increasingly complex in assemblies and mixed materials. And so you have a situation where the most important thing is just to keep taking that waste away. That's what we want. That's what we're paying for in our taxes and our council tax. And so they were just taking it away, and there wasn't really a concern about like the environment as much. There were people talking about it, but not like shouting, from the rooftops.
And then I guess because what's happened, right? Because now a bin at times is not just one function. You might have in your home, you might have a multitudes of bins, different types of bins based on where you live. So I know some boroughs, you get a food waste bin, you get a recycling bin, and then you get your trash bin.
Yeah.
But I know that you also know a lot about landfill, and you're actually the first person that I think that told me many, many years ago that like not everything that goes in the recycling bin gets recycled. So, is there a relationships with, it's this current relationship we have with bin, and then obviously we don't think about the aftermath. We put stuff in the bin, we maybe put in the bin, we realize, okay, it's time to empty the bin, we leave it out, somebody takes it, or if you live in a new build apartment complex, you go downstairs to the major bin. Like I have it I remember my grandma's house, there was a chute.
Yeah.
They used to put the things with the chute, it goes into the main bin in like this place, and then
always wanted one of those.
Unhygienic. But and then in the apartment block that I live in now, you go all the way to the basement, you've got this big bins. Stinks. But they give you so much different options. You've got waste bin, you've got recycle bin, you've got electronics bin, like battery bins, clothes bins.
That's cool.
And like a range of different stuff. But there isn't really a food bin. Yeah. But we leave it there. I don't know. I don't even know when folks come from the local borough to come pick it up and like take it away. But after that process is done, our relationship with waste
is done.
It's done. But there is still a whole other sophisticated process that happens, which
it's amazing, isn't it? It's like we put something in a box and we're immediately absolved of all responsibility for any sort of consumption, for any emissions, use of resource materials, whatever happens to that product. It's like not our problem anymore. We have done our bit. We've put it in the right bin. That's someone else's issue. And it's absolutely mental that firstly that happens, and secondly we don't actually have a clue. Most people don't have a clue as to what happens next. So obviously, it gets collected. The recycling system in the UK is private, so we as in terms of what gets recycled, it's kind of up to the companies. I think I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong here, but there are certain requirements that obviously have to take the recycling, but in terms of what they're prioritizing, it's going to be based on the value of those materials. So recycled PET, which is what they make a Coke bottle from, that's very high in demand because all these big drinks brands want to use 100% recycled PET. So there's a high value there. But perhaps say for a PP, a polypropylene or something, maybe it's ebbs and flows. Maybe right now it's not that in demand, so they'll put less effort into picking out those materials, and because obviously they want to make money from this, and otherwise what's the point? And the thing is we've got increasingly complex assemblies, increasingly complex material combinations. The consumers don't actually know what they're doing. I mean, I see it all the time, people taking photographs being like, what am I supposed to do with all of this? It's got a toothpaste or like some sort of cosmetic that's got a film around the outside, and then it's got a cap that's one material and a base that's another material, and which one goes in what bin? Can they all go in the recycling bin? What do I do with these type, like plastic bags or plastic films or pouches? And so people wish cycle all the time. They just put them in the bin and hoping that they get recycled. I mean, in my blog, I found all kinds of things in the recycling bin because people they feel guilty and they're like, well, if I put it in the recycling bin, I mean, we had a sofa in there once, a whole sofa in the recycling bin, in one of the big ones, obviously. And it's like, people they're just like, well, there's value here. Someone's going to take it. It's like, yeah, but the infrastructure's not set up for that. And so the recycling goes to the recycling centre. It all gets sort of crushed up. And, well, the big bits that shouldn't be in there, like sofas, get taken out. And then certain things that are obvious, can be picked out. And there's quite a lot of manual processing that happens. And then when things like metals can they use a giant magnet and they can collect all of those things out. And then the plastics that get left, glass, for example, gets separated, and then it just gets sort of crushed and washed. And the plastics end up going into quite often then get flaked. So they basically just get chopped up into tiny pieces, and then they use like a flotation tank to separate the plastics based on their density. So they're able to then sort plastics by the type of plastic, and anything that shouldn't be there will sink to the bottom. And all the stuff that's like either too small to get through the recycling stream, or shouldn't be there, or is considered contaminant, gets separated, and most time gets incinerated. So there's lots of stuff that goes into the recycling stream that ends up getting incinerated. There's also lots of stuff that perhaps has value but not enough value that perhaps goes and gets incinerated. And then there's also just loads of stuff that doesn't end up in the right place and either gets shipped overseas, dumped from another country, or ends up in landfill. And so, and a huge amount of stuff that we think goes into landfill does actually just get burned. So I think we burn, I'm probably going to be wrong here, but around 40% of our waste in the UK. And there's energy recapture that can happen, but it's obviously not what we think is happening to our waste. And it's so interesting because we don't see that. we don't. I live next to a recycling centre, so I can smell it, but I can't see it. But we don't. We have such a disconnect between the objects in use and the objects that we use after they've gone into that black hole of a bin. But
and then that's that. Thank you so much for the detailed explanation of that experience and that whole underlying behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see, I guess. Now that even leads me to that question, right? It's one of the most mundane objects we have in this office alone. I can see 3 bins right in front, 5 bins, 5 bins right in front of me. And so, like, what is the future? I know there is an appetite for, there is some explorations from councils. We've done some work in the past around the concept of smart bins, where we were looking at, and I guess the smart bins purpose is to simply be connected to Wi-Fi or 5G coverage, alert like a local council when the bin is full so it can be emptied. Also looking at, I guess, when I think of the smart bin, I guess it's trying to add a sort of interface and this connectivity layer to the bin, to the process of a bin, in order to, I guess, capture data, develop sensors, I guess, the aspect of air quality, air purity, all of these different combinations. But I feel like, the bin is just like, it's like an interface, but it's like, do we redefine our relationship with waste, or is it redefining our relationship with the bin, or does the bin redefine itself? What do you think, like, in terms of that relationship? Because, I know you can add these, connectivity points to it, interfaces, I guess. But like, that just maybe helps for like data capturing and for clarity, but it doesn't help
the next step.
Right?
Yeah, I think obviously there's an argument to say if we had more data, we may be able to act on it. Like if I knew exactly how much waste I was throwing out of different types of materials and different, and then could map that with perhaps what then happens to those materials, I could then say, okay, well, actually, I'm going to make conscious effort to reduce my intake of this type of plastics, or these or switch to this type of thing. I think it's a really interesting, even just a sort of challenge for yourself to actually take a kind of a tally of the waste that you're actually producing, because it really is quite eye-opening as to what the waste actually is. Another area where I think that obviously the challenge is, where is that tech best used? So if I have something put into my own home, there's not really, it feels like there's not much I can do. I could learn from it, and I could then, maybe I would shop and I would buy loose apples rather than packaged apples. I would take a Tupperware to a refill store instead of buying pasta in plastic, or go to the butcher's instead of the meat section in Tesco's. But those are kind of small scale changes, and obviously that is still dependent on my individual action. The where that I think it's really exciting that tech is being used is within those recycling centres, where by connecting recycling centres to other recycling centres, and also then connecting them to the users of those materials. Because if we can say, look, we've got X amount of, they can scan the materials as they come into the recycling centre, which helps with a lot more accurate sorting. But it also helps you say, okay, we've got this volume of this type of plastic, this volume of aluminium, this volume of steel. And then the material users, the people who actually want that material, can then have a clarity as to what the supply is like, and potentially change their demand, or the recyclers can have an understanding of what the demand is like and maybe structure the supply. And then that can be fed into brands to say, okay, well, this is a more valuable material, and kind of push us into a better circular economy. And so maybe if we can connect all of that up, we can actually improve. Think of currently, it's like,
so the bin doesn't become a permanent. The bin is no longer the end point.
Yeah.
It's just part of this.
It's part of a process. It's part of a circular loop.
And that changes that redefinition, right? Because it's like when something's in a bin, it's associated with the end.
Yeah.
You're done. You know, be gone.
Yeah.
From the end. Where the bin now becomes an interface for this contribution to this ecosystem that currently functions, and what we're doing is like our contributions to that.
And I think we've always been, in the last few years especially, we've been encouraged to believe that's a really positive action. Recycle. That is what we're told is the best thing we can do for the environment. It's crap. It's a load of bollocks that we should. There's so many other things that we could do, but it at least is ingrained in us that recycling is a good thing. That putting something in that bin is our duty. We're doing our bit.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're then finding out that only like 10% of the stuff that we're putting in that bin is actually being recycled. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't. There's nothing more I can do. So yeah, I mean, like, we could talk about bins all day.
But what is your thoughts on bins and some of the conversations we had on here? And also, what would you like to reimagine what your own relationship with the bin would be like? Or if you had a dream and a wand, one wish, with a magic wand, whatever, what would your dream bin be like if there's even a need for it in the first place? But thank you so much. You are listening to
Rethinking the Mundane with Jo and Lex.
With Jo and Lex, yeah.
We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.